Next up, please welcome to the stage Aaron Parecki, who will walk us through some of the IndieWeb building blocks that are powering the sites that you've seen and that you can use for yourself and mix and match in ways that we won't expect.
All right, so I'm going to try to keep this quick. So I'm going to be breezing through a lot of this stuff, but the goal of this presentation is to walk through the mechanics of some of the building blocks that I got you. Oh.
Nope. That's
The end. I'll just.
Can we just throw on the?
Good.
Yeah.
I'll just do this.
To do it up there.
Nailed it.
There. Easy fix. So the goal of this is to talk through some of the building blocks of the IndieWeb and some of the core concepts and some of the specs, and sort of give you an idea of things that we have working pretty well right now, and some ideas of things you might want to work on for your own website over the course of this weekend. Hopefully it gives us some ideas for discussion topics for this afternoon. So IndieWeb starts with your domain name. Without a domain name, you are not on the web. And the other part of the idea of having a domain name is that it is a thing that you can control and decide what to do with. If you are relying on, for example, a WordPress.com hosted WordPress or a GitHub.io address, and you want to move your website somewhere else, you can't without changing also your address. So if you write aaronpk.github.io on a business card and hand it to somebody, and then you're like, I don't want GitHub pages anymore. I want to use WordPress. Then, well, too bad. You're stuck. You've given out your address, and now nobody can find your new site. So if you have a domain name, I use aaronparecki.com. I can point it at GitHub pages. I can point it at WordPress. I can point it at my own server, and I can swap it out behind the scenes and decide where people are going to find my content. So once you have a domain name, you get to put stuff on it. And people have very, very wildly different ideas of what they want to put on their website. And that's part of the joy of the web. There's sort of a lot of common things people end up doing, which is like their name and maybe their photo, maybe their bio, maybe a portfolio section. And then as we're seeing with a lot of these sites is the idea of posting blog posts or photos or other short snippets of text and things like that. But there is obviously no limit to what you can put on your site, which is fun. And I have a couple of examples to show different kinds of things, but we've seen a lot. This is another person from IndieWebCamp. So you can see she has some wide variety of kinds of things, some events, and then Martijn has a giant pile of information all about him.
Curious about whether something can go on your homepage, he will tell
you. He's probably done it. Yep. I also wanted to mention that this what you're seeing here is on the wiki, so it's linked from the schedule. So if you want to follow along and click links, there's a lot of links in here to go and explore other places of the wiki to get some more ideas. So there's down here, this building block is the homepage, and if you click on that, you'll end up on a whole, starting your rabbit hole through the wiki. Another thing people put on their website is links to other places they exist on the internet, such as your Twitter account, your Facebook, GitHub for code, other places you write content. On my website, the way I do that is with these little links at the bottom. So I have a whole bunch of little icons of other profiles of mine. I don't have any text that explains them. Whatever, I can decide to do that. Tontek has similar icons, but he actually has text that describes what they are, so probably a little more useful. Other places you can find his content. And the other thing that does is if you link to your Twitter or your GitHub in particular, which are things that you can log into, and they have an API, then you can use your website then to log into this wiki. So when you, I'm probably not logged in on this browser, so that'll work well. when you go to log in, it's going to ask you for your domain name here. And if you type your domain, it will then find these profiles that you've linked to, like my Twitter account and my GitHub account. And you can then log in as that with that account, and it'll log into the wiki as your domain name. So it's a quick way to start using your domain for something. It's by linking to these other profiles. When you link to the profile, you have to add a little rel equals me attribute on it, and that makes it machine readable and tells the wiki and other things that this is used somewhere else on the internet. People like to post blog posts and short notes and microblog posts on their site. We've seen a couple of these already. Here's what my notes look like. So these are just the ones with their short text notes. It looks kind of like Twitter. My design is heavily influenced by Twitter. Here's Gregor's notes. A little cleaner look there. Here's, this is another, this is actually a WordPress site. Amy has, so you can see there's a pretty wide variety of like different ways you can present this, but the important thing is that there's text and like the date and a link to the note. The difference between notes and blog posts is that notes don't have a title. If there's a title, then it's more like a blog post. So we use these. We have this notes or microblog posts as this concept. Syndication is all about people actually pushing your content out there so people can find it. So without syndicating, everybody is going to have to either be subscribed to your site directly through like its RSS feed, or it's just through the website itself, or they'll go to your website. And as we all know, like as soon as you start having more than like 5 or 6 people, you're not going to go and actually start clicking to everybody's websites all the time. So you probably also have a lot of friends who still use Twitter and Facebook and other places. So you don't want to completely abandon them, and you still want to engage with friends there. So that's another good reason to syndicate your content. We saw a couple of examples of that in the demos earlier. So there's manual. You can do it manually. You can actually just literally copy and paste the text and post it again on Twitter. You can use tools like Bridgie to have it do it automatically. There's a variety of ways you can actually do it, but the point is that when you post something on your website, also then copy it to Twitter and Facebook so that you can still reach the people who are following you there. We call that concept of syndication posse, which is publish on your own site and syndicate elsewhere. So you'll see this come up a lot, this acronym. And then when you do publish your note out to other places, it's a good idea to link to where you've published it. So on my notes, I have little icons for other places this post exists. And so it's also on Instagram and also on Twitter. And again, these are marked up in a machine-readable way so that these systems can link up the Twitter version and my version in order for these likes, the likes and the comments to come back. Speaking of which, backfeed is another concept in the building block. And that is the concept of bringing the responses from your posts that you syndicated back to your website. So here's a post that Anomaly posted, and it's a big post on our website, and then she also copied it out to Facebook and Twitter. And now when people write comments on Facebook and comments on Twitter, those comments get pulled back into the website. So she gets to collect the complete list of responses there. I found a post that actually has comments from, responses from micro.blog and Facebook and Twitter, all combined into one list, which is pretty fun. So I get to have that sort of master copy of all the different things people have said about my content back on my site. There's, of course, tons of different ways to actually do it, but Bridgie is a fantastic tool that has done a lot of the hard work for you. This is it's open source, but it's also just running on a website, so you can just use it. And this page describes how to do it, how to set it up, and then also you can just go there and start doing it. But basically, you tell it, hey, here's my Twitter account, here's my website, and then it'll start linking up the posts and sending the Twitter comments back. In order to use Bridgie, your site needs to support web mention, which is the next building block I'm going to talk about. So here we're going to start getting into some of the technical details. And that's good. I breezed through the easy stuff in time, so I actually think I can spend some time on this stuff. So web mention is a spec, and the idea with web mention is that if you have, if I write a post and then somebody else writes a post on their site, they want to be able to tell me, hey, I wrote this comment about this post of yours, and let me know that they linked to me. And this idea of, hey, this website links to this website, we've packaged it up and wrapped it up as a spec, so that there's like a very strict rules to follow and how to do things, and hopefully covers all the edge cases. And then we can start building tools that support the spec. So Bridgie is one of those tools that supports web mention. The way Bridgie works is that you just set up your site to support web mentions at all, and then Bridgie will just sort of start firing web mentions at you that happen to be coming from Twitter. The way that here's a comment that was sent from someone's micro.blog account, and so not from a third party, or not from like a Twitter or a Facebook silo. The way that my site knows what is the text of his post and like what's the photo and his URL and the timestamp and all that, that's all because on the web page, this is actually marked up in a machine readable way so that my site can pull out the bits and pieces and find all the different aspects of it. And that's microformats, which is the next building block. And the reason that we do that is because this lets everybody make their own decisions about what their site runs without having to all agree to like run the same software. So I can have my site, which is like a pile of PHP code, and you can have your website that's static HTML, and someone else can write a website in Ruby on Rails. And as long as we're all generating HTML that is marked up with microformats, we can all talk to each other, because that's where the compatibility layer is. There's a couple ways to add web mention to your site. If you're using WordPress, there's a WordPress plugin that will do it. If you are using a static site or anything else really, there's a service called webmention.io, which is something that I wrote, which is what I use. And it basically handles receiving web mentions for you. You just drop a little tag into your site, and it'll start receiving them for you and give you an API to retrieve them. Some CMSs have it built in. So Known is a good example of a CMS that just has built-in web mention support. And there's a few others. So web mention, the web mention I mentioned is the notification that, hey, this page links to this page. What you end up doing with that information is entirely up to you. Most people want to show that back on the post as comments, but you don't actually have to. Like, you don't have to show comments. You can decide that you only want it in a log that you can see. Some people get push notifications to their phone and don't show them on their site. Some people don't want push notifications. They just want to see like in an admin interface, they want to just show the list of what people have sent them. Totally up to you, but this is the mechanism that lets that happen. So microformats are the way that you can turn your HTML into machine-readable code. This is a really simple example of like a blog post that you might write, right? So there's a article tag, there's the name of the post, there's the name of the person that wrote the post with a link to their site, there's a featured image, and then the actual blog post content. And I tried to cram this into as few lines as possible, so it's pretty compact. So this is supposed to represent, like, you might already be doing this on your site if you have blog posts. You're going to have some HTML that looks something like this. With what the idea with microformats is you take the HTML you already have and then you just add things, like point to what the different pieces are. So if you have an article tag for your blog post, you add a class hentry, and that means, hey, this is a blog post. And then if you have a header tag or some other element that contains the blog post name, you add a class p-name, and now the parsers know that's the name of the blog post. Same with author and featured image and blog post content. There's a vocabulary of all these different terms and what they mean and what people will do with them when they encounter them. The prefixes, the h dash and p dash and u dash and all that, that's basically instructions to the parser to tell it where to find the value. So, for example, name of the blog post, plain text properties use the p prefix. So because this is just text, you use p-name. Because the content of a blog post is usually HTML, you use e. For URLs, you use the u prefix. And now notice that, of course, image tag doesn't have any content inside the image tag. The value is actually the source attribute. So the u tells the parser, hey, go get the value from this source attribute, things like that. There's more information if you follow this link down at the bottom to actually how to do that. But you can kind of get the idea. The whole goal here is that you take the HTML you already have and you add a few things to it instead of having to like make a whole different thing to generate a JSON file or an XML file or something. At the other end, when somebody encounters your HTML page and runs it through a parser, it turns it into a data structure, most often represented in JSON. But it'll be like if you're using a Ruby parser, turns it into a Ruby data structure, or a PHP parser turns it into PHP array. This is what the previous example looks like run through a parser. So you can see that it is an h-entry, and here is the author. There is the name of the person and their URL. There is the name of the blog post and the featured image and all that. So once you start adding microformats, you can use these parsers, and there's some online versions of them that you can check, and you can start seeing what people will see or what code will see when they are parsing the website. And then when I'm receiving web mentions on my site, I'm not parsing HTML anymore. I'm actually just going through this data structure. So I don't have to deal with HTML stuff. I just get to see this nice, clean JSON data. So I mentioned that there's several vocabularies with different names of properties. I'm not going to go through them all because there's a lot, but h-entry is probably the most common one that you'll encounter because that is sort of a catch-all for a post. It means this is a post, there's probably going to be some content. It has a date it was published. There might be a photo, it might be a video. It could be a bookmark or a check-in, but sort of anything that you would consider a post with its own URL and its own date, you use h-entry for. These links will link you out to documentation for the specific kind of post and what classes they use and what properties they use. So you can follow those links to, so if you're wondering like, I have a bookmark on my site, how do I mark it up? Click on the bookmark page and then you'll find some examples there. There's some experimental ones too, which I have a lot of stuff on my site that is very experimental. I post everything I eat and I drink. I have like runs if I'm biking or running or on a plane. Those things all go to my site, and so there's some experimental microformats for those. But it's all contained in this h-entry post. H-card is another one you'll see often, which is represents a person or a venue or a business. So the big difference there is that like an h-card doesn't have like a published date. There's no like, there's a birthday of a person. There's maybe like a date the business opened, but this is a fixed thing. It's a HTML bit that describes a person or a place. Normally, they just contain the name and a link to the thing and usually a photo. So that one's too big. There we go. Yeah, so this is like a minimal H card where there's just the link to the page is an image, a photo of the person and the name. But then you can also go crazy, like, so Chris's H card is on his site over in the sidebar. So you can see he's got a lot more stuff in his H card. He's got his name, email, PGP key, business stuff, bunch of other links to other profiles, address, or at least the city and zip code.
Forget if it's not enough, he has an entire other page with more.
My H card is just this chunk at the top. So if you start looking at the HTML, you'll see here's the H card container. There's my image with the URL and the image photo, all that. And then Martine's is probably the biggest one ever because he has like anything, so many things there. But those are all marked up with experimental microformats. So when you run this through a parser, you end up getting a nice bit of machine-readable code out of it. Yeah, all sorts of stuff. So once you are, so that's all about about HTML and microformats is the stuff that goes on your site. The next step after that is like, how do you actually want to create those posts? WordPress has a built-in admin interface. Great, so you have an easy path there. If you're using a static site generator, you're probably going to be writing HTML files by hand or with the little header blocks at the top. If you're building your own website from scratch like I did, you're going to have to build your own interface, and I don't like doing that, so I try to avoid doing it as much as I can. And this is where MicroPub comes in. I post from all sorts of different things, and I don't want to have to, like, I want to post from my phone, but I don't want to write an iOS app because I'm actually not a very good iOS developer. But thankfully, there are people who are good iOS developers. So wouldn't it be awesome if I could use an app that somebody else writes that posts to my website? So that is what MicroPub is for. I don't have a posting interface on my website, and instead, I only use MicroPub apps to post data. Quill is a MicroPub app that I use to post most things. It's one that I wrote. It's a web app, and you can use it too. If you go to quill.p3k.io, it will ask you to sign in with your website, and as soon as you do that, you're going to see a screen that looks like this. It's going to say, hold on, I don't know what to do with you. You don't have enough stuff yet. So it will walk you through, like, here's what you need to do in order to use Quill. So I like pointing people at this one first because it's meant to be a walkthrough of actually like how to get you set up on it. But it'll basically tell you, you need a token endpoint. So you can just copy and paste that bit of HTML onto your home page, and then that step will turn green. Later, you can go and replace it with your own code if you want, but that'll at least get you started. And then the last step is the MicroPub endpoint itself, which is going to be a thing on a server somewhere that knows how to write data into your website. So for a database-driven website, that is probably just going to be like insert a row into the database. For a static site generator website, it's going to be, here's how to generate a file in the format that the static site generator uses. Once you do that, you can actually log into Quill or any of these other MicroPub apps and start posting. I'm going to skip the demo because we don't have much time. There is the micro.blog service you've heard mentioned a couple times. There is a native app where if you log into that app as your website, it'll post directly to it, not to your micro.blog account. OmniBear is a browser extension so that you can reply and favorite things directly from within your browser. Eddie is working on the indigenous iOS app, which you saw a little bit earlier. The other thing you can post from is readers. So Together and Woodwind are two readers that you can use to follow people's content, and then also from within those interfaces start replying and favoriting things. And I showed you Own Your Swarm and Own Your Gram earlier, which post data from Foursquare and Instagram. The whole idea with Micropub is that you get to use all of these tools as soon as you support the spec. And if that means installing the Micropub WordPress plugin, that's an easy way to do it. If it means reading the spec because you have your own homegrown site, hopefully it's not too big of a thing to get through, and then you just start using all these tools, which is kind of fun. The Micropub spec is meant to be super simple so that it doesn't take too long to get started. This is, for example, an example of what you would receive on your server. You can actually test your server using curl, like you can send a curl command to make a post. It's super simple. It just comes through as like form post variables on your server. But there's a few layers to it, so you can get pretty deep into that. There's links here to the spec itself and to IndieAuth, which is how the posts will actually log you in and authenticate and get a token it can use. I want to mention following last because it is something that is relatively unexplored still. So I mentioned that we have, like, you're probably not going to go around to everybody's website and read all the posts on their website directly. You want like a Twitter-like experience where everything is just there and you can just read everybody you're following from one place. Feed readers, RSS readers, are a common pattern for this, and the thing that feed readers often don't have yet is the ability to then interact with those posts that come through them. And for things like microblogging, where you want to be able to favorite and reply to things, you want that sort of integrated experience of, I'm looking at a post from someone, I want to just reply to it right there. I don't want to think about like going opening up my blogging software, right? You just want it to work. So we still have a lot of work to do in this area because it's a lot of interface work and a lot of UI to build out. There's a couple of good starts. There's Woodwind, which is up at woodwind.xyz, and also Together at that URL. And the cool thing about those is I can just start adding people to those readers, and then I can just start reading the content from everybody I'm following all in one place and respond to it. The other building block here is WebSub, which is formerly known as PubSub Hubbub, which is how you can essentially make all this stuff real time. So instead of having everybody have to go pull feeds every 5 minutes, WebSub will let the author push out the content to anybody subscribed to it. The spec is here. There's a testing tool, websub.rocks, where if you want to add support for WebSub to your feeds, you can use that tool to test them, and it'll try to subscribe to you and things like that. Yeah, so that is the super quick version of building blocks. This is a wiki page. I encourage you to look at this for links because I had to go through that really quick. And I could have spent at least 5 more minutes on each section. So this will be a good resource for the weekend, hopefully. And with that, I guess we should do session scheduling.
Yeah. Thank you, Aaron.